Well, y'all, I am so excited. We have got a special treat today. We've got Barb with us, and she is going to share so much. And I gotta say, I'm a little nervous because she is the guru on communication. So I'm like, I gotta have all my P's and Q's together. So welcome to the show, Barb.
Welcome. It's wonderful to be with you, Adrian. I love podcasts. This is so fun. I'm glad that I didn't age out of being able to participate in this wonderful way to communicate.
Oh, well, it's just such a treat. And I think hopefully podcasts will continue to grow and grow because it's a great way to connect and stay in the know, I guess. I don't know.
It reminds me of the old days of being on live radio college shows. Did that way back in the day. And it was fun.
Oh,
You
how
had to
cool.
kind of be ready for anything. That was like when people just called in and yeah, that
Oh,
was fun.
that's terrifying. Oh, well, hopefully, we don't have any like live call-ins, but that would be a whole other ball of wax. But I would love to kind of like jump off and get to know you. So would you be open to sharing your like professional career story? Like where'd you start and how'd you get to where you are today?
Oh, it's fun to tell those stories. And I think it's really fun when you meet another professional to ask that question and to hear where people went and where one opportunity led to another, because that's always the story. And that's the thing that I will tell new professionals as well as students. And I worked in academia for a long time, and I'll get to that part of my story. But you need to just recognize that everything you do is an opportunity to learn and grow and take the next step. And you're learning something, even if you don't want to stay there, that you're going to use. I promise you. So I actually came to nutrition through an interest in food. I attended Purdue University, and when I went there as a freshman, my major was, what was it called? Foods and Business. It's now Foods and Nutrition and Business. I'm not even sure if that major still exists there. But my goal at that time was to become director of the Good Housekeeping Institute. I mean, shoot high, right?
Yes, I love that.
Develop recipes and write articles and all of that. Have I ever done that? No. And that's okay. And as I went through the foods and nutrition curriculum, very early on, probably during my freshman year, my advisor suggested you only need to take about 2 more classes to have a combined major with dietetics. And she talked to me about what does a dietitian do? What is an RD? I was like, oh, sure, that sounds like a good idea. Well, and then as I continued through the curriculum, I realized that I really loved learning about nutrition as much as learning about food. And I really got excited. You never know what a guest speaker might do. When someone from the Dairy Council spoke at one of our little interest group meetings about what she did in her job, and I was like, nutrition education. And I had also combined communication as a minor, even though it wasn't officially a minor, because of, keep in mind, I still had that interest in communication, even though I never became the director of the Good Housekeeping Institute. So I took the radio and broadcasting and journalism and all of those things. So that was my undergraduate. So I did graduate in a dual major. And at the time, I will really date myself, you didn't have to do an internship. If you went on to graduate school and had a certain level of experiences, then you could sit for the exam. So because I was really interested in nutrition education, I went from Purdue to Cornell and did a master's there and was able to get the experience that I needed to qualify to take the exam and passed it. Okay.
Wow.
So,
That's
jealous, but it does give me the qualification of I've never worked in clinical. So when people say you have to, my advice is no, you don't. Now,
I love it.
Totally admire clinical dietitians, and they're very needed. And if that's the job path that you have, I applaud you. We all have different interests, but I've always worked in the area as much as possible of communicating about nutrition. Now, lots of people on this podcast, listening to this podcast, are in private practice. So you'll love what my first job was.
Ooh.
Back in 1981, I've just finished my master's, and I'm in the hospital delivering my daughter, who's now 40. And the gentleman that was going to be her pediatrician and was just a local GP, we live in a small town, he was asking me what I did. And I said, well, I just finished grad school. I was going to be taking the exam to become a dietitian. And he said, his eyes lit up and he said, we need someone to counsel our patients. Would you do that? And I was like, oh, that sounds like, I think I heard of something called a private practice. Maybe let me think about that. And
with a newborn, you got to ask that question.
And I'm like, well, I kind of wanted to stay home a little bit, but that's something I could kind of do on the side. So really for a period of probably the next 15, 20 years, that wasn't the only thing I did, but I did a private practice. I'm in my home office. I just recently, I have like all these file cabinets over there. I just recently purged all of through the shredder, all those, and I got a kick out of looking. I was like, oh my goodness, I know them. I didn't realize. So there are so many opportunities, and keep in mind that was way before Instagram and the internet, and even before we really took insurance very much.
Wow.
People wrote you a check. I learned a lot. And the other advice I would give was, we had just moved. I'm back in Indiana near Purdue, and we had just moved back after I'd finished grad school. And I got involved in our local dietetic association. Now they're called Academy affiliates or whatever. And those connections are priceless. And because of the connections that I made in our local group, now keep in mind, even my private practice, I really didn't start of my own initiative. I was asked to do that. Every other job I've ever had, I've been asked to do. So let me think in what order they came in. So I'm doing my private practice. My daughter is like 4 now, and my son is just a baby, my first son. And I get asked to do a maternity leave for someone that's consulting in a nursing home that's local. I was like, oh, I can try this. That 3 months turned into 3 years. And I did that simultaneously with doing a private practice. So I didn't stop my private practice, because if you've done consulting, it's like a 1 day a week thing. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, that was invaluable when later in life, I'm caring for my mother in that kind of a facility, and my mother-in-law, and everything you do, you use, you really do. Yeah. And that combined food service and the counseling, and then my favorite part of the job, which I'm sure everyone will think, oh, I can't believe this was creating in-services for the staff as I teach. So I did that. But that wasn't going to be my career. I wasn't going to then start this whole consulting firm like a lot of people do and do very successfully. It wasn't my niche. But then also through a connection in our dietetic association, I was asked to work in WIC. They were expanding the local program, and would I be a dietitian in WIC? And I loved the whole nutrition education. This is back when WIC was really a pretty new program. And I did WIC for 20 years.
Whoa.
And that was a combination of being the dietitian, the breastfeeding counselor. I became the coordinator for a while. When I started doing something else, I let someone else have that job, and then worked for them. It was part-time to full-time to part-time. Again, our careers have so many options that are really flexible. Mm-hmm. I remember when I had my 3rd child, I was working for WIC, and for 9 months, he came to the office with me. And WIC really promotes that. That's like role modeling to the moms you work with, that, don't mind me while I breastfeed my baby and teach you about it, whatever. So I loved WIC. I thoroughly enjoyed that. And during the time that I was with WIC, I'd created lots of educational materials to teach in WIC. Mm-hmm. And one of the main ones was, and you can go to my website and you can still get lessons, I developed classes for teaching children about food and nutrition. It was called Kids Club, and it was developed with a USDA grant. And then they gave me permission to market it. So for 17 years, I had, what did I call it? Noteworthy creations. And I sold educational curriculums and material for teaching kids about food and nutrition.
Oh, wow.
That led to a lot of speaking around the country. So this was still before conferences had gone away. And I probably spoke in most states at WIC programs and Head Start programs. And it was so fun. I love teaching people about how do you get kids excited about food and nutrition, and how to use puppets. And there's some in the back here. I could go get. And my claim to fame was I wrote music, not write the music, but write the lyrics to popular songs that teach nutrition. And so I got the nickname, the Singing Dietitian. And because kids, if you have kids, you know that they like music, and singing is a really good way to learn and remember things. So all of these things kind of overlap. I did my private practice for about as long as I could until I was doing WIC really too much and my business. And then in the meantime, my favorite class at Purdue, Nutrition Communication, the woman that had taught it and had started it years before and had been my professor, was retiring. And so Purdue asked me, again, I've never looked for a job. Purdue asked me, would I consider coming back to teach? And I was like, well, let me think about it. Yes, I'll try academia. And so I did that for 16 and a half years. And I taught lots of other things as well as it kind of grew, but always nutrition communication was part of it. And my department head used to tell me, you have no idea, Barb, across the country, there are not that many nutrition communication courses. I was like, really? This has to be a standard class in every curriculum. Oh no, it's very rare. And I had no idea until later how rare it is, and loved that class and loved teaching that class. And I retired in 2016. And a few months after I'd retired, the Academy reached out to me and said, would you help us write a book about nutrition communication? Now, keep in mind that in 2015, I had published a textbook for introductory nutrition. Why I had ever done that, I'm not really sure. I like trying things, and it was like killed me. Writing a textbook is huge amount of work, huge. I can't even and yet one of the reviewers of that book, Roberta Larson Dife, who has written the complete food and nutrition guide for the Academy, was one of the reviewers. And so she sits on committees in the Academy looking at what kind of books they need to write. And so when the Academy was getting all of these requests, we need a book about communication, Roberta said, Barb Mayfield's the person to do it. I'm pretty much unknown. I mean, I haven't been a Academy president or anything like that. I mean, I was a local president. But, I was busy with other things, and you prioritize what you're going to do. And becoming an Academy person wasn't a big thing. I've always been a member. But when I was retired and they asked me that, I said yes. Because it was a way for me to, what I consider leaving a legacy. And the beauty of writing, whether you write blogs or articles or whatever, is you're putting into a permanent record the wealth of ideas and knowledge and values and viewpoints that can help other people. And so to be able to put what I taught for all those years into something that everyone can use. So it was written to be used as a textbook, but it's also written so that the average dietitian can get a copy and learn herself or himself, because let's face it, if we're not having those kind of classes, we haven't been training our future nutrition professionals. And like we make as a point in the book, it is the essence of everything we do. Communicating is what we do. So long story short, I didn't let you get a word in edgewise, which is not a very good communication skill. That's my 40-year career in a nutshell. And
that's just amazing. And I'm sitting here like pins and needles of just like, okay, I'm like, I need to like download this book like into my brain to learn how to be a better communicator. Because I think you said from like the very beginning was we are communicators and wrapped in a dietitian outfit. And so if we don't know how to communicate, no matter the knowledge we have in our brains and what we're trying to get across, it won't ever be heard, and those lifestyle changes won't ever happen. So out of this whole entire career, I love that your pediatrician asked you to open a private practice after giving birth. I'm just laughing at that because it's funny as you were saying that my 1-year-old is walking around. I'm like, oh, because I would have laughed.
Can sit on your lap.
Yeah, I was like, this is amazing. So what do you feel has been missing in our dietetic communication skills? Like, where can we start?
So let me start with what you know, because that's a really good thing when you're working with an audience. Figure out what they know already, okay? And I think that we do a pretty good job in our curriculums of teaching counseling. And so one of the things that we impress upon people for counseling is to be patient-centered. And the same thing is true for communication. It's audience-centered. So this podcast is to dietitians. If you're speaking to a roundtable of physicians and nurses and other people in your healthcare setting, that's a different audience. If you're speaking to the participants in a cardiac rehab class, that's a different audience. So knowing your audience is a really fundamental starting point. And then figuring out what is it they need, what words are understandable to them, what are their goals. It's not that different than what you're going to do when you're counseling, and then translate that into whether you're writing or posting on social media or preparing a lesson for a class or a food demo, whatever it is. Begin there. And you've been taught that concept.
Yeah. And I love that you broke it down, because as you're saying that, I was like, oh, that all makes sense. Like, oh, I know those concepts, but I guess kind of with the idea of communication, it feels a lot scarier. But when you kind of boil it down from that, when you're like, oh, know your audience, like I wouldn't show up to a cardiologist lecture with puppets. That would be for kids.
Right. That's right. And you speak differently to different audiences. And you hope that other people communicating with you recognize that. And you've noticed in your life the difference. First class I ever had with my students each year in nutrition communication really just had us reflect on our own experiences with good communicators and poor communicators. And it was not hard for them to come up with a whole list of things that characterized both. And then we set goals. How do we make ourselves more in this category versus this one? And the other thing, you talk about communication being scary. The thing that, because people would come into a communications course scared because everybody hates public speaking kind of thing, except a few of us. And the thing that I try to remind my students of is that you get better. And as you get better, you get more confident. But one of the other things that we put in the book is communication as a relationship. And if you think of it in that way, and getting to know that audience, and even if it's an audience of 1,000, they are people. They are individual people that you are serving. And they showed up expecting you to deliver good stuff. And I don't know why we have this fear, like as if they brought rotten tomatoes with them. But those kind of audiences are really, really rare. Now, when I would work with grad students and they were getting ready to do a seminar, then I might say, there's going to be some critical professors in the audience that are going to ask you those tough questions. But in most of our situations, that isn't the case. Do you ever show up to something to be disappointed?
No. Yeah, you want to no, you're so excited to be there.
Yeah, so just like capitalize on that.
I
Walk
love
into
that.
the room thinking they're glad to be here. Now, again, there might be counseling encounters where it might be more scary, but in most of the situations where we're communicating nutrition, they showed up to learn something from someone who they considered an expert. Deliver on that.
Oh, that definitely like turns the scary way down. I love that. So when you were working with, when you were teaching the students and you had them make the list of a good communicator and not such a great one, what kind of things were on that list of like making a really good communicator besides knowing the audience and going to their goals? Were there any other like key factors of like, oh, that's a great communicator?
Some of the things that would show up over and over again had to do with how engaging a person was. So imagine the people that in your life you categorize that way. They connected with you and they cared about you and they made that clear.
Mm.
Whether it was that eye contact, that smile, that asking that question that really showed a genuine interest and that it wasn't all about them. Mm-hmm. Those were the kinds of things that elevated themselves to the tops of the list. Enthusiasm, obviously knowing their stuff, kind of those kind of things. Being able to translate something that was hard into something that really made sense and was very practical and useful. All of those things that, again, we've been told, but we haven't always been role modeled it.
Yeah. And I would say also like have the permission to. I always felt like when I was first like doing nutritional counseling, like I had to be the dietitian and I had to know my stuff and all that. And so I would get stuck in my head. And then to be able to be like, oh, I can connect with this person and like have that real genuine connection and build that rapport. One, it was way more fun. And
Yes.
yeah, and then the patient or the audience would take it home and like actually act on it. And so I think that's the other piece is when you said communication is relationship building and like having that eye contact, it truly makes it the idea and permission to be like, just be a human too.
And there isn't a person that isn't.
Yes.
So like just recognize it. And in some situations, you're going to be dealing with people that are dealing with a lot of medical stress and all kinds of things. And so recognizing all of that.
Yeah.
And that you're coming to the table with issues and just be real. Yeah.
Which sounds so easy to do, but I think it's one of the hardest things to balance as we're a professional is how do I be real? And then how do I also be a professional? Yeah.
And it a lot of it comes though with practice too. Think about how much better you are at everything you do as part of your career and be willing to learn from your mistakes and always be learning.
I love that.
I mean, my career journey was always one thing after another. Oh, I can learn that. Why not?
Love that. It's so great. And I'm so glad that you shared like you haven't ever like applied for a job as all opportunities. That's just speaks volumes to like building up that community, building up connections. I would have to say you were probably like the 10th dietitian on the show that has said like, oh yeah, because of my connections in the academy or because I was like said yes and volunteered, like look at the career. So I just really appreciate that.
And give back. So if someone reaches out and you reach back to them, you might be the one in a million that does that. And then when they're looking for something, they seek you out. So really, I've given lots of talks to students about the whole connections and networking, and it's not for a resume building. Like, do it genuinely. Like if you're really seriously wanting to connect and learn from them and be clear about what you have to offer, it's just a win-win.
Oh, so true. So true. One of my mentors said that their motto was, I will always leave, she said, a lot of doors have been opened for me in my profession because the connections I make, and I will always leave those doors open behind me so more people can follow through. I was like,
excellent.
yes.
Excellent wisdom. Yes.
Yes. So I just really appreciate that. Well, Barb, so with this idea of communications is truly one of the things as a dietitian, we need to hone in our skills, learn more, always be learning. What kind of advice can we learn from you of like, how do we hone in these skills more?
I think it's something that we practice every day, honestly. And I think that that's kind of part of your motto of how do you grow, is kind of looking at the things that you try to promote on your podcast. You know, how can you, it's little steps. So again, think back. I started my career in 1981. I'm right now learning Instagram and how to communicate better and more effectively. Never stop growing. Think about all the channels of the future of ways that we might spread our message. We have to keep learning and being willing to enter into those unknowns. But we also need to rest very firmly on foundational principles of communication that don't change. Things like being audience-centered and crafting a message that is going to resonate with that audience and being clear, and all of those things don't change based on whether you're doing it in a video or a food demo or on social media, right?
Oh, I like that. I like that. That makes it
Keep
less
that
scary.
balance.
Yeah.
And yet we just always get better. And look for feedback. You know, don't operate in a silo, even if it's a Zoom kind of connection. One of the things that I'm really enjoying doing is I have 2 Zoom calls a month with educators that are interested in using the book or already using the book or looking at creating courses. And we share ideas and they ask questions and we brainstorm things. And it's really fun to get people together. And just any educator that wants to get on the call just jumps in. And you could do that in all kinds of settings in dietetics. You get together with others that have a similar goal in mind and say, hey, I'm working on this. What are your ideas? You know, kind of like a mastermind group or accountability groups. Those, especially if you are in private practice and you're working solo, make connections that you can help each other. We're not in competition. We are not in competition with each other.
Yes. Speaking my love languages. I love it. I love it. Because it is, I think so often when you are online or in those social media channels, it can feel lonely and it can feel competitive. And so having a way to connect and share ideas and grow together, because it can be really lonely. And so I love that idea. Oh my goodness, how great for all those educators to learn and share ideas. And I hope more and more people in private practice do that too, of like, let's get together because there is more than
promote each other.
Yes. Exactly.
You are not going to run out of work.
Oh, not even close. And and there's some patients that people don't want to see. Like, oh my goodness, if a renal patient calls, oh, bless. No, thank you.
And so you know someone that's their niche and that's what they do best. And so send them that. And the beauty of this whole online being able to provide services, oh my goodness, I always saw people in my private practice that could drive to my house.
I love that. Yeah, it's amazing how, and like you said, always be learning. How can we continue to meet our audiences and learn where they're wanting to receive care, where they're wanting to connect more? And so, Barb, this has just been so fun. And I feel like I'm not as scared to talk to you. I feel like, okay, I think I communicated. Okay, I think I passed this class. But
and you have a big impact on how your communication partner is communicating. And it starts with the eye contact and the smile. So if you can just kind of connect in that way and just kind of let them know it's okay. They're gonna, and you've seen that with your patients. I mean, how many patients have you had to like just spill their guts? And you're like, oh, I need to know all of this. But you were being rewarded with a level of trust. And so when those kind of things happen, recognize I did something right in making them feel open.
Oh, and I think that's so important for the ones in private practice and counseling, because we want to make sure we're doing it right. And we want to make sure we're like landing that with a patient. And I love that we kind of have that little check of like, oh, they're able to like feel safe and secure to trust us and share. So, oh, that's wonderful.
Well, and if you're coming back at someone like condemning, like we had one staff member in WIC at one point that we had to just kind of graciously encourage to find another position, because she was very, very critical of anyone in the sort of limited resource audience. And let's face it, that's who we're working with. And she can make them feel really bad in a really short period of time. And she just needed to find a different audience to work with. And it's important for us to recognize that we need to be working with people that we really feel like we can be supportive of. And I feel like we should be supportive of anyone we're working with. But if, for any reason you don't, that's your problem. It's not your patient's.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Having that permission again to like do what feels good, and like, oh, I really can connect with these patients, or maybe it is me and that's my stuff.
Like maybe sports nutrition isn't your thing, or you talk about renal or whatever. If something isn't where you're going to do your best work, there is somebody else that it is their best work.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that
we can spread ourselves too thin.
Yes, dietitians, we are really good at wanting to say yes to everything when we shouldn't.
No, because I got good advice when I was a young mom that when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else. And I'm sure you've heard that before. And it's good to remind yourself, what am I saying no to if I say yes to this? And sometimes it's just the quality of your work.
Oh yeah, or quality of life.
Quality of life, yes.
Yes, if I'm saying yes to staying up, what am I saying no to? Oh yeah, sleep. Oh, Barb, this has been so much fun. How can we continue to learn from you?
Well, I would definitely invite anyone to visit my website, nutritioncommunicator.com, and connect with me. I try to post helpful things. If you want to reach out, I am very accessible and love to talk with people. If you're an educator, obviously, I'm thinking about doing something similar for practitioners, but again, I have to kind of figure out how much time do I have. Certainly, I'd encourage anyone to get the book, but I also have lots of free resources on my website that complement the book, or that might be a starting point for someone before they.
God.
The other thing that I'll make an ad for the book, if you need continuing education credits for the price of the book, and it's cheaper for members, you get 14 hours of continuing education credit.
Whoa, that's a lot. That's a wonderful.
That's a lot. And that's, there's a link in the back of the book that takes you to an online quiz that you can take open book. Like you're like, you read the question, you go, oh, I think that might be in chapter 25. You look up the answer. So it's not like you're not going to pass.
Yeah.
Well, I really encourage people to do that. But I feel very proud of the book. We had 57 authors. I didn't write it solo. Wow. I was the editor, and I helped with I helped author 18 of the 42 chapters, but lots and lots of expertise went into it.
Wow.
All areas of dietetics. And it was a volunteer thing. We just put out a big plea to many dietetic practice groups, and people said, count me in. I'd like to help.
Oh, what a cool, what a gift to be able to work with so many cool dietitians across the communication world.
And I only knew or had met 7 of them. before we ever started. And over the course of writing, I never even met in person a high percentage of them. I didn't even know what they looked like, or, you know, we didn't even do a lot of Zoom when we were working on it. We did a few, but it was, you know, everything was done remotely.
Oh, well, I hope you guys get everybody comes together at some point, maybe a big fancy party.
We've tried to get together at fancy meetings, and of course we haven't for the last 2 years, but I think we're going to try in Orlando.
Oh,
but
good.
It's been great to get to know those people. And they're over the course of and I have this written on my website on kind of a Q&A thing. Over the course of writing the book, and it takes several years to put together a book that size, 8 babies were born.
Oh my gosh.
The authors, and that doesn't even count like grandkids. I probably had 2 grandkids I have 6, and I think a couple of them were born, maybe 3 during the time we wrote that book.
Wow, that's even better. I love that. Oh, how cute.
And, you know, so these people were doing it in addition to life. And dietitians are very giving that way.
Mm-hmm. We're a pretty special bunch of people.
Pat yourselves on the back.
Yes, exactly. Well, Barb, this has been so much fun. We will put a link to your website and the book and all the goodies, but in their show notes. But thank you so much for hanging out with us today. Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone have a wonderful day.
Bye.